Mr. Welton, these are photos of tires belonging to the defendant's car. And these are photos of the tire marks left by the assailant's car as it fled the convenience store. Now, are you familiar with these?
Yes, I am.
Uh-huh. Could you elaborate, please, sir?
We compared the tire marks. They're the same model and size tire.
They're the same size and model tire.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Listen to Pavarotti. Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And you know, just when I think our community's ready for some bombshell truths, I get up this morning and first thing I see is old clickbaits. Old clickbaits about frats. I'm like, come on, man. I'll just say this and then we'll move on. You've got old 4chan posts that people want to continue to point at as like it's some kind of truth, like fights at the frat house with Ethan. Yet, we have now actually received, well over probably 1,000 court documents. Now they're being unsealed for us so we can see them with our own eyes. But also they've released, well over 1,000 police reports from both the Moscow Police Department and the Idaho State Police. In these police reports, I think I've counted over 200 interviews with students at the university. And you know what I haven't seen in all of the interviews that I've read? One statement about a fight at the frat house. Not one. So the old 4chan post about the fight at the frat house doesn't line up with anything in reality. And you know, for so long people have said, well, Pavarotti gets where's he getting all this stuff? He's not following the facts. I've always followed the facts. And now that we have real facts that have come out in police reports, I've located an assailant. Did a video last night thinking everybody was ready for it. And in essence, proving the assailant. I don't even know that law enforcement really put it together, to be very frank with you. I guess they must have. But not in one police report has there been anything about a fight at the frat house. So I understand the issue. And one of the issues is geography, right? It's geography. You see, people outside of the United States, they can't actually pull up the Idaho State Police records or the MPD records for that fact. So maybe there ought to be somebody out there, because maybe they don't know how to use VPNs and actually locate those records so they can read them themselves. But maybe somebody should send them those police reports so they'll stop talking about old 4chan posts about fights at frat houses. And then on the other end of the scale, the people that can't get their minds around the evidence in the case. I literally see people that they know that Brian Kohberger in their mind is guilty, yet they'll do videos suggesting that the timeline of the crime was between 3 and 4 a.m. Or people that are stuck on, they can't look at, thousands of data points of evidence, and they'll still bring up old doctored Linda Lane audio of people screaming at 2 a.m. So until people get past all of the non-evidence in the case and the fake stuff, they'll never open their eyes to the truth. And the communities out there that look at us like we're conspiracy theorists, I can assure you that's the main thing that they look at, is the nonsense, the things that don't line up with any facts in the case. Like, the crime didn't happen at 2 a.m. Chances are that the screams that were added to those thousands of revamped and redone Linda Lane videos probably aren't even really there. I mean, we'll know when they actually release the unedited versions, I guess. But until they release the unedited versions, maybe we should just not take it as gospel that we're hearing screams at 2 a.m. and it goes in the face of all the other evidence. And then until we read the police reports, maybe we should not even talk about the farcical fight at the frat house. I don't know. Get frustrated. Put a lot of time and effort into bringing the truth out in this case, and then I see magical nonsense constantly about frats. And give me a break. If you look deep into the Timmy Reed situation, Timmy Reed was a little racist guy, and he was saying racist things about football players. So what happened? The football team got together, went over and whooped Timmy Reed. Went over there and cracked him in the head. I mean, that's typically what happens in every town. It has nothing to do with a frat. It has to do with kids running their mouths, and things happen when people run their mouths. And, you know, getting clocked in your eye and getting a black eye is hardly a scenario for, you know, to come up with a whole frat conspiracy. Give me a break. I mean, the nonsense that clickbaiters continue to put out there gets on my nerves, always has. If y'all followed me from the beginning, you know that one of the first things that I said when I got on these videos was, why are people on these frat conspiracies? To this day, the frats. Jack D and the frats. In light of all the evidence that's come out, there's an assailant that was cut in the atrocity, and he got his blood all over this house. We now see it in the court documents. But guess what? Like in my video last night, just to clarify some things, I know a lot of people would say, hey, now, Pav, this guy was born in 1983, so he couldn't have been 39. I've seen a lot of comments like that. Well, you got to understand, we're looking at court documents and police reports from 2002. So in 2002, if you're born in 1983, you'd be 39. So you got to take into context the, you know, the time and dates of these things. The other thing that keeps coming up is, wouldn't these guys be in CODIS? Yeah, they would be in CODIS. And if you follow the case close, you'll know that the only sample that was ever entered into CODIS was the DNA from the button snap of the knife sheath that they claimed belonged to Brian Koberger. And they claimed they couldn't put any of the other samples through CODIS because it would knock out their sample on the DNA on the button snap of the knife sheath. So none of the other samples were ever run through CODIS. All they got to do is take those samples, run them through CODIS. This thing would have been over. So I don't know. That's what the evidence shows. That's what the police report shows. That's what the testimony on the stand shows. Nothing's ever showed anything about a fight at the frat house. Show me a police report where even a random individual that they interviewed said anything about a fight at the frat house. Can't find one because it isn't there. So maybe read the police reports before you go to nonsense. I don't know. Just gets frustrating. But in this episode, we're going to go to actual facts. Actual facts. We're going to take a look at a couple of court documents that have been unsealed. And strangely enough, these are FBI detailed forensic reports. These are reports on nefariousness that happened around the time of the plea deal and untold transcripts of closed hearings. And we'll also go to the situation that I have been attacked for, where I discussed how the closed hearing on, I believe it was May 15th, where it said roles of families and Hitler. And I did so many videos on it where I said, look, they're bringing in the families, and I bet you Hitler is tearing Steve G up for out there, you know, being in the media and spewing stuff. And I got attacked for it. Steve G's not a leak. I'll be danged if Steve G didn't come out and tell us exactly what was said in that closed hearing. And it was exactly what I said that he would say. So I wish people would just follow the evidence in the case and not make up a bunch of nonsensical, farcical stuff, because the evidence tells you the truth. And we're following the evidence on this channel. Hold on to your hats, folks. Then we have another filing, and it is a special hearing on May 21st. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out what this special hearing is about. About a week or two ago, I did a video after Mr. G went on to a few of those online channels, one of them, pretty major, and he disclosed a lot of things in those interviews. And I immediately made a video and I said, you know what? The defense needs to file a motion for discovery because he's saying that he's got information from his investigators. I don't know if it's been turned over to the defense. I believe during that hearing on May 21st that they're going to point out the fact that Mr. G has been out there disclosing this evidence that wasn't supposed to be disclosed, busting that non-dissemination order that he clearly stated in his very first pretrial conference with them, that the non-dissemination order extends to the victims' families and their attorneys. So there's no doubt that, Mr. G was under that order, and the judge is going to remind him of that in that court hearing, I believe.
We're not going to bring her back. And I was like, that's not what this is about. This is about you guys doing everything by the book.
Wait, the judge told you you're not going to bring her back?
Yeah. Yelling at me, telling me he didn't want me to talk to the media anymore. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. I'm going to talk to the media every single time I want. He basically said, well, then we'll never have a trial.
Yeah, he in a closed hearing.
I can't believe a judge told you how you're supposed to behave and you can't bring her back. That is not appropriate for a judge to tell a grieving parent, you can't bring her back. Let's just let it go. It's not going to bring her back. It's not about bringing her back. It is about justice.
Yeah, he actually said, he was talking, we all were in the courtroom or on Zoom, all the families. And he actually said, and the Gonzalez family, especially the dad, needs to shut his mouth.
And I said, that ain't gonna happen.
And he said, I don't agree with that. And he said, I don't care if you don't agree with that. And Steve said, well, I mean, me, I'm fighting for justice for my daughter. And he says, do you think that that you're going to bring her back? Doing this all is talking to the media is going to bring her back? And Steve goes, no, I mean, I know that that's not going to bring her back, but I still have. We got to hold people accountable. We have a voice.
About a week or two ago, I did a video after Mr. G went on to a few of those online channels, one of them, pretty major, and he disclosed a lot of things in those interviews. And I immediately made a video and I said, you know what? The defense needs to file a motion for discovery because he's saying that he's got information from his investigators. I don't know if it's been turned over to the defense. And I'll be danged, we finally learned what the defense's 24th supplemental request for discovery was. Exhibit W, filed on June 25th. This is the state's response to it. And you can see that the state's responses are provided in blue. The state will continue to supplement its discovery responses as additional information is received. And what did the defense want? Number one is 441, copy of all arrest reports, charging documents, and videos for Molly Marie McMethie. And then there's something blacked out right here, y'all. And no matter how I look at this, the only thing that would make sense in this blacked out box right here would be the words and then another name from June 1st, 2022 through May 31st, 2025. So does this say copy of all arrest reports, charging documents, and videos for Molly McMethie and James Mackey from June 1st, 2022 to May 31st, 2025? I mean, that seems like that would fit. Or does it say and Janelle Braun? I mean, why they got to black that one out? Because that one is obviously something that the public didn't know. They didn't want us to know. The state has complied with the video portion of this request and has provided the following. And look, they discover the body camera that we've all watched of Molly McMethie and her arrest there at the Walmart. And look, date discovered, 7/7/25. It's always been my suspicion, and I've gone over this, that the deal was made in this case actually on June 26th. So this would have been discovered They filed it the day before, I believe, the real deal was made, and then they discovered it in July after the deal had already been made. The state has requested the balance of this request and will discover upon receipt. The state has requested the balance of this request and will discover upon receipt. The state has complied with this motion and has requested the balance of this request. Copy of all arrest reports, charging documents, and videos. So they provided that one, and I guess they're talking about they'll give them more. Copy of all email communication between the Gonzalez family, their attorney or representative, and the Latah County Prosecutor's Office relating to Molly McMethy. So what did they do? They went straight out and filed a discovery request, and they want email communications from Mr. Gonzalez and his attorney. And look at there, on 6/19/25 and 6/16/25, they discovered that on July 7th. The state has complied with this request. It reserves the right to object to further disclosures that are outside the scope of the above request pursuant to ICR 16.3G. Imagine that. We'll talk about that in a minute. The state has provided the following, and we just covered that. But then this is where it gets nefarious, y'all. Copy of all email communications from the Latah County Prosecutor's Office and law enforcement and or other agents, which means like the FBI and everybody else, relating to Molly McMethy. The state objects. Look at this. The state objects to this request as it is exempted from disclosure pursuant to ICR 16.3G. Any updated supplemental reports and or recordings of interviews conducted by law enforcement with Molly McMethy, the state has requested this information and will discover upon receipt. I bet. But for some reason, they wouldn't turn over to the defense the copy of all the email communications between Bill Thompson, other members of law enforcement, and or other agents of law enforcement relating to Molly. Why wouldn't they turn all that over? Well, they cite ICR 16.3G. Now, we've seen a police report where she gives the statement and says she doesn't see Brian's car, and she sees basically Tisdale driving through there. But there must have been other communications that Bill Thompson and other agents of the law enforcement community had with Molly McMethy, because they're refusing to turn over that communication. Why? ICR 16.3G tells us why. So, the way they say that, you got Idaho Criminal Rule 16, Discovery and Inspection. And see the way this is actually written? See how this says ICR 16, and then there's a parentheses around the 3, and then there's a parentheses around the G. So when it says 16.3 and G, that doesn't mean 16.3G. It means he's actually citing two different rules in this ICR 16. One is Rule 3, the other one is Rule G. And that's telling. Because when you go to 3, it's defendant's prior record. On written request of the defendant, the prosecuting attorney must furnish the defendant copy of the defendant's prior criminal record, if any, if it is then or may become available to the prosecuting attorney. So he cites that one. But what he's really citing is G. And we've gone through G quite a bit on this channel. When you go down here to G, well, it's prosecution information not subject to disclosure. And that's why he's citing this rule, because it's not subject to disclosure. And what does G consist of? Well, it consists of work product. Disclosure must not be required of legal research or of records, correspondence, or reports or memoranda to the extent that they contain the opinions, theories, or conclusions of the prosecuting attorney or members of the prosecuting attorney's legal staff. And then it also talks about informants. Disclosure must not be required of an informant's identity unless the informant is to be produced as a witness at a hearing or trial, subject to any protective order under subsection I of this rule, or a disclosure order under subsection B6 of this rule. So they didn't want to turn over that information because it's not subject for them to turn over, because it's not subject to disclosure, because they are informants, and we know they were informants, but also because they were informants in this case. And I think it's going to tell the story of Molly McMethy and what they were going to have her doing. What do you think? Now we get a kind of a glimpse into what happened in that closed hearing that y'all know I really wanted to be able to witness. And that was the closed hearing on June 18th about the alternative perpetrators and the proffer. I speculated after looking at the defense's proffer that they were not actually proffering that they believed that the four individuals that they had named were the actual alternate perpetrators. And I covered that in depth. Well, now we get to see what the defense's actual strategy was and what is blocked out of this hearing that we should get to see, because this is the biggest bunch of crap I've ever seen in my life, blocking out what's blocked out. That is not transparency to anything. And I mean, people ought to be slamming their hands down on the desk screaming, "Unseal that doc, Hippler." And goodness, I would like to interview Bicka Barlow and just get an idea of what that conversation was about. And I think she should go out in a press conference and say, here's what happened, because we need to know. I mean, this is bullcrap. We need to know, but we do know a lot based on what we're about to read. Hold on to your hats, folks. Okay, so this is what they call the court minutes, and it's the transcript from the June 18th hearing on alternative perpetrators and a few other things. But you can see the sealed section starts here. We got to see the opening of that hearing, and it was only for about 2 minutes, and then it went to the closed session, and then it's going to discuss here the motion for alternative perpetrators, and it talks about court resumes after they turn the cameras off. All parties previously present are again present in the court. This portion of the hearing is sealed closed. I guess some of it still is. Hippler, we're here for the alternate perpetrator argument. After would like to discuss the concerns, demands that have been made related to the so-called investigation, and then just some trial miscellaneous stuff. Let's start with the alternate perpetrator arguments. Wait a minute. We're here for alternative perpetrator argument. After would like to discuss the concerns, demands that have been made related to the so-called investigation. Now, is he referring to the defense calling it a so-called investigation, or is he actually calling the investigation a so-called investigation? I don't know which it is. It could be either one. If he's calling the investigation a so-called investigation, then that should tell us something right there about how Hippler viewed this thing. But he could be just referring to the way the defense refers to the investigation, and the way we all should refer to it as a so-called investigation. But we'll start with Massoth. We've submitted material in briefing, so unless you have specific questions, I don't know that there's much difference between the state's position and our position. Does the court have specific questions? I don't have specific questions, says Judge Hippler. My understanding of the state's position is if they don't have a problem with us confronting this evidence, and to the extent that we do that throughout the trial, we will do that step by step. If there is a development by the end, and we could ask the court for an alternate perpetrator instruction, we will discuss that then. We have absolutely no intention of using those words in an opening statement. So, right there, Massoth tells you exactly what the defense's strategy was going to be. They didn't want the alternate perpetrator proffer to be actually accepted so that they would say, okay, these are the four alternate perpetrators. They wanted for an alternate perpetrator to develop during the course of the trial through testimony by witnesses. And then once they developed an alternate perpetrator, they would have then stopped, asked the court, alternate perpetrator instruction so that they could then start using the alternate perpetrator as this is the other perpetrator that you should be aware of in this case, or the alternate perpetrators you should be aware of in this case. Now, what is the judge's response? Well, let's find out what the state's position is. I too was curious in their briefing as to the statement they have no objection to confrontation and cross-examination, of which of course they have, but then the question becomes scope. So basically what Hippler's saying right here is, let's find out what the state's position is too, because I was curious why the state was stupid and said they had no objection to the confrontation and cross-examination. So he's basically saying that he disagrees with why the prosecution was stupid in regard to this and was falling for the defense's trap. And again, trying to work on behalf of the prosecution. Thompson, I think we may be dealing with an issue of semantics. Judge. State views alternate perpetrator evidence as being a very defined category. So he's taking the cue from Hippler and making his argument with it. Defendant will argue that he didn't do it and that this particular person did it. Defense does not have factual basis to make that kind of argument. They have provided general information that they might ask investigators about to deal with the scope of the investigation, but not to the point of justifying them pointing to a particular person, saying that that's an alternative perpetrator. Looking at the defense's most recent filing, response to state's objection, there is mention about the defense's theory that there might be more than one perpetrator. That is not alternate perpetrator evidence. They are welcome to cross-examine the scope. He's not disputing that there might be more than one perpetrator, y'all, in this. He's saying there's mention about the defense's theory that there might be more than one perpetrator. He doesn't say there's no evidence to show there's more than one perpetrator in the crime. No, what does he say? That's not an alternate perpetrator evidence. They are welcome to cross-examine the scope and quality of the investigation, but they should be directed that they cannot focus or direct the jury to say this other person is the person who committed these crimes. So Thompson's making a general argument, but it's got to be noted that he does not attack the defense's theory that there's more than one perpetrator. He's just attacking the fact that that is not an alternate perpetrator evidence. And then we get to the response from Massoff. And this is where the real truth comes in, y'all. I want to clarify two reasons why there was a statement about there could be more. I want to clarify two reasons why there was a statement about there could be more, meaning there could be more than one perpetrator. One being that we have not looked at all of the tip evidence. Oh, wait, there could be more. Wait, back up. I want to clarify two reasons why there was a statement about there could be more, meaning there could be more than just the 4 that was proffered. One being that we have not looked at all of the tip evidence that is coming in, which is just a ginormous amount. We wouldn't just surprise you. We know you don't like surprises. When it comes to the other thing with regard to the numbers beyond 4, see, they continually hit this numbers beyond the 4 that they've proffered. I think that the court has seen in the exhibits the number of people who have been examined for DNA. What's great is now we have all witnessed these exhibits as well. They took DNA samples from tons and tons of people. There are some people whose DNA was extracted and comparisons were made, meaning the 4 that they actually proffered, and there is a whole other group that are on those states' exhibits where the DNA samples were taken, but were never developed into an extraction for comparison purposes. So what they're saying is, you got these 4 that we've all read that document now that I read to you the other day that's been unsealed, where they went through on Showalter, Decor, the African-American kids at the grocery store, and Cole Berenberg, where they took their DNA samples that they created a profile for and compared it to all the DNA that they had in the, in the crime scene. And they excluded them based on all those samples. What the defense is saying is, that's great. Y'all excluded them. We want to show that y'all did exclude them, but we're also going to show that there's people whose DNA was extracted, comparisons were made, meaning those 4, and there's a whole other group. It's on the state's exhibits where the DNA samples were taken but were never developed into an extraction for comparison purposes. So their alternate perpetrator that they're going to try to uncover during trial is not one of these 4, just like we said. It's somebody that they're not wanting the prosecution or anybody at that point to know who their alternate perpetrator is, but we know it's somebody that they got their DNA from, and it's somebody that they didn't compare to all those samples. So they may very well have known that Mowich was their alternate perpetrator. However, I'm not sure of that, y'all. I'm thinking maybe they had other people in mind. I think the Mowich angle is the angle that's going to get this thing reopened. Also, names I think we will know if they develop over the course of the case and how people are coming in, whether it's in the form of initials or if it's in the form of names, or if they're putting these people they have listed on the stand and it's very clear what their names are. We'll have discussion of what's fair game in closing argument. I will leave it at that. They may have very well been planning to put Molly McMichael, when the prosecution puts her on the stand, hammering her and letting that lead into disclosing the alternate perpetrator. What Miss Massoff just said is exactly, this is back to Thompson. Now, here's where Thompson realizes that the jig is up and he knows what the defense is going to try to do and he's scared to death. What Miss Massoff just said is exactly what we're concerned about. And why we asked the court to direct they make an appropriate proffer to justify whoever they want to claim as an alternate perpetrator. To take the position, if they develop during trial, defeats the entire purpose of the motion in limine and leaves it wide open and just subject to attack or ambush during the course of the trial. We believe that's not appropriate. So he knows that they're going to come up with somebody on his list that they're going to hammer into disclosing who the real alternate perpetrator is, and he's scared to death. No, they got to tell us now. It's going to be an ambush to the state. How's it going to be an ambush to the state? Y'all have ambushed the entire case. Then the judge, of course, is going to chime in and try to save Thompson here. I did give a deadline for the alternate perpetrators to be identified and developed. Apart from whatever my ruling is with regard to those 4 individuals, anyone else, it would have to be before anything is brought to the jury and be an extraordinary showing of good cause as to why it was not brought to the court's attention prior to then. So this is what killed the defense's entire strategy in the case right here. This statement, he's saying before it's brought to the jury. So it can't be just uncovered during the course of the trial through witness testimony. They have to name them, bring them to the judge before the jury's seated so the judge can say it's not an extraordinary showing of good cause and deny them being able to do it. So that is the travesty right there. And you can see what's going to happen after this, that there must have been some really mad defense team members because a war ensued. I'd have to look at all the relevant factors, including prejudice at that point to the state for not having brought that forward in the light of the deadline set by the court. See, look at that. I would have to, including relevant factors, including prejudice at that point to the state. Who cares about prejudicing the state's BS case? Give me a break. We're talking about truth and justice here, Judge. I suppose during trial, if somebody confesses, that's a different situation. I'm not holding out hope or belief that's going to happen, but I suppose you never know. I want to be clear, I will issue a ruling, but I'm going to tell you that I don't find the defense has submitted anywhere near sufficient evidence to get beyond rank speculation that these individuals were in any way involved in this crime. So he's back to the 4 the defense proffered. But that is nowhere near tying them to the crime itself. So he had a little statement he didn't want us to hear. The reason I wanted to have this hearing and the reason I wanted it sealed is because I'm not inclined to allow counsel to go out and try to destroy reputations of people without any foundation to do so. Before there is any suggestion to the jury that a specific named individual was involved in this case, I better hear about it first. Defense is entitled to cross-examine about the scope of the state's investigation and the thoroughness of the investigation and the reasonableness of the investigation. Certainly, questions may potentially come about why you didn't do this or why you didn't do that from the officers. Where we may get more tenuous is when we start getting into collateral information about individuals. I can understand that a claimed motive might be important as it relates to the reasonableness of the investigation, and then it says provides examples. So it didn't tell us what examples he provided of that. I want to be careful that if it is offered at all. So he's scared to death about motives in this, and if it's offered at all, and then what happens after all of this? Then the judge apparently makes a big, long speech. Long speech. Look, it's a whole page long. And then at the end of the judge's speech, then the war ensues. Look at this. Counsel for defense. This is where Bicka Barlow jumps in after the judge's speech and says something. The judge fires back. Bicka fires back. 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 Judge fires back. Bicka does some educating the judge. Judge fires back. Bicka fires back. 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 Judge fires back. Bicka does some educating to the judge. Judge fires back. Bicka. Judge. Bicka. Judge. Bicka. Judge. Bicka. Judge. Bicka. Judge. Judge did some mansplaining there. Bicka. Judge. Bicka. Judge. Bicka. Judge does a little more mansplaining. Bicka fires back. Judge. Bicka. Judge. Bicka. Judge. Bicka. Judge. Bicka. Judge does some mansplaining. Bicka fires back. Judge. Bicka. Judge. Judge. I guess the judge fired back at himself. Bicka. Judge. Bicka does some educating. Judge does some mansplaining. Bicka fires back. Judge does some mansplaining. Bicka fires back. Judge fires back. Judge fires back. Thompson adds his 2 cents at the end. And then they get off alternate perpetrators and go to something else. Now, why is all this blacked out so that we can't see it? We know what Bicka's specialty is, and it's DNA. So we're talking about alternate perpetrators and proffers here, and they don't want us to hear the conversation that Judge Hippler and Barlow go through, because we can absolutely see what this conversation was like. So Hippler wasn't too confident that anybody was going to confess. Maybe that was a secret hint for him to have the prosecution go try to force Kohberger's guilty plea. Right? There was a forced confession for you, Hippler. There's no reason why we can't see all that back and forth, though, between Bicka Barlow and Judge Hippler. That is the information that we need to see. And there's nothing in there. I mean, they could black out names or what else, but there should be nothing in there other than blacking out names that would be inappropriate for us to see as it relates to what we know she was arguing about, because she's the DNA expert. So BS. I mean, can you believe mainstream morons that have been following this case hasn't jumped all over this and screamed from the rooftops? We want to see what the heck was said during this portion of this closed hearing. I mean, where is transparency, right? But anyway, I know that was a lot for me to cover in that video, but it's so enlightening. I mean, now we know what the defense's strategy was around the alternate perpetrators. It wasn't for the 4 that they named. They were going to specifically point out how they created profiles for them and excluded them. But then there was other profiles that were taken during the course of the investigation, or samples that were taken that were never even turned into a profile to even be excluded from the evidence at the crime scene. So they should have absolutely been allowed to explore that through testimony of witnesses. And then if a alternate perpetrator ensued from that testimony, then they should have been allowed to use that alternate perpetrator. The prosecution was scared to death of that, and the judge did like he always did and kind of threw the prosecution a bone and said, here's what you need to argue. And when they argued it, he sustained their argument. People need to open their eyes. We'll go over that FBI report on actual evidence, their forensic report, in the next video because I've covered too much in this one, and that one is mind-boggling as well. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms, and until next time, Pavarotti's out.